Welcome, my fellow MTG zealots. We're doing another Commander deck tech. This time we're doing the Dragon, and this is going to be Dragon Tribal. So let's jump in and talk about the Commander itself. First, it is a legendary creature dragon avatar, which costs you 4 colorless and every color of the color wheel. It's got eminence, and the eminence on this particular card is as long as the Dragon is in the command zone or on the battlefield, other dragon spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So we're going to be reducing the dragons in this build by 1 just from the commander being in the command zone, as well as other cards in the 99 that reduce the cost of dragons even further. We've got at least a handful of here that do reduction for dragons specifically. Now, if for some reason you also tease this thing onto the battlefield, it's going to be a whopping 10/10 body flyer with whenever one or more dragons you control attack, draw that many cards, then you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. And actually, this isn't the only card that's going to allow you to drop a creature card from your hand without paying its mana cost. We got at least one more in this build. All right, so let's go through the packages, but before we do, if you're new, please consider hitting subscribe, hit that like button, and the alerts. Moving on. All right, so let's talk about the packages. We have the land package, of course, and in every deck tech we do, most likely I say something along the lines of, this is the most versatile section that you can swap in and out for budgetary reasons. We are specifically not running the original dual lands in this build because we're running all of the fetch lands, I believe, and all of the shock lands. And even those, you can certainly swap those out because we're not levering landfall except for maybe a couple cards in this build. So in terms of land, you can swap out for tapped duels, you can swap out for basic cards. That will greatly reduce the cost of your land base. All right, so we got land, we got dragon support as a category. We have dragons, of course, because this is all about Dragon Tribal. There are a few support cards in here that are not dragons specifically that either reduce the cost or they're goblins, etc., etc., etc. So we have the dragons, we have support, the land, a couple control pieces, few protection pieces, ramp, of course, because we really want to ramp up into those tribal dragons. And then, of course, we have draw. And in every deck tech, we have the maybe board / swap out board for different cards you may consider swapping in and swapping out, depending on if you want to tweak it even further than the build we're presenting today. All right, so let's go ahead and start. Apparently, Architect wants us to start with lands, so let's start with lands. We're going to blow through these really quickly. There are a couple cards in here that are dragon specific. So Ancient Tomb, of course, is a great include. It gives you 2 colorless, costs you 2 damage. And we are literally going to blow through these by just saying we're running all of the fetch lands here. We're running all of these shock lands, and then a couple to note is, City of Brass, because we want to be able to do mana fixing. We have Cavern of Souls, because we are doing mostly tribal. In case you're not super familiar with Cavern of Souls, basically it allows you to spend mana on the dragon, because we're going to name dragon as the creature type, and then that card can't be countered by, blue spells, etc. We're running, of course, some staples like Command Tower. However, we are running a couple that are very dragon specific, like Crucible of the Spirit Dragon. Now, it's got the tap it for colorless. It also has pay 1 tap, put a storage counter on Crucible of the Spirit Dragon. And even cooler is tap, remove X storage counters from Crucible of the Spirit Dragon, and then you can add that many X counters in any color combination of colors to play a dragon spell specifically and or an activated ability. So very cool include for anybody running dragons. So the other dragon specific card is Haven of the Spirit Dragon. And this one Also has some dragon synergy. It's got the normal tap for colorless, and then you can also tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, spend this mana only to cast a dragon creature spell. And then the last one is for 2 tap, sack it, and then you can return a target dragon card. Well, and or Ugin Planeswalker, although we're not running Ugin, so that is irrelevant, and you can bring it from the graveyard to your hand. All right, another couple to just highlight in terms of land base is probably nothing else. Everything else is pretty much staples like Path of Ancestry, the Shock lands, the Fetch lands, etc., etc. All right, so now let's jump into Dragon support next, and then we'll just go through the different packages. All right, so in terms of dragons, this is a great include for Dragon Tribal. You drop this onto the battlefield, dragon creatures you control get +3/+3. As if the dragons weren't big enough already. Now we can really synergize, especially with some of the dragon tokens that you're going to be able to start generating onto the battlefield. Now this one is really fun, and it's not dragon specific, albeit it is called the Dragon Arch. I love that. It's a 5-drop, and for 2, you can tap it and put a multicolored creature card from your hand into play. So it's kind of like a Piper, but in the form of an artifact, and you can just redo it over and over and over again. This thing is really fun, really cool, and we're playing a lot of creature spells that have multiple colored mana in their casting cost. All right, Cerrone. Dragon Tempest. It's a 2-drop enchantment. Whenever a creature with flying enters the battlefield under your control, it gains haste until end of turn, which is going to really be helpful with some of the stompy dragons that do something if they hit face. Whenever a dragon enters the battlefield under your control, it deals X damage to target creature or player, where X is the number of dragons you control. Just an added little bonus for something that costs you only 2 to drop onto the battlefield. Dragonkin Berserker. It's a 2-drop right out of Kaldheim. It's brand new as of this recording. It is a human Berserker 2/2-drop first striker. Boast abilities you activate cost 1 less to activate for each dragon you control. And it's got Boast, 4 colorless red, create a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. So in theory, you could be boasting this thing for only the red mana pip because you have enough dragons out on the battlefield. And even if you don't, just by doing one of those, you keep reducing the cost. And what's even cooler is that this doesn't require a tap mechanic, so you can do multiple dragon creations of those tokens within any given turn. Lovely. All right, Dragonlord's Servant. I think this is super funny artwork. This also reduces the cost of dragon spells by 1. It's a Goblin Shaman for a 2-drop. All right, Dragon Master Outcast is very cool in terms of being a measly 1 red mana to drop. It's a human shaman 1/1. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 6 or more lands, create a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. So talk about a dragon creation machine. This thing is fabulous for any Dragon Tribal. Dragon Speaker Shaman also reduces the cost of dragons, but this one does it by 2. Kalia of the Vast. It is colorless red, white, black 2/2 flyer, and this is gonna help you tease out dragons out of your hand. Whenever Kalia of the Vast attacks an opponent, you may put an angel, demon, or dragon creature card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. That part is super great, and attacking that opponent. Fabulous. Sarkhan Unbroken. This thing you drop onto the playfield. It starts with 4 loyalty, and if you uptick it by 1, you can draw a card, then add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So it's got draw mechanic, and it's got the ability to add any color of mana, so it's got mana fixing built in. Now it's -2. You can put a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying onto the battlefield. Also cool. And its ultimate, if you happen to get to it, is search your library for any number of dragon creature cards and put them onto the battlefield. Then shuffle your library. So wow, you could basically just drop a huge amount of dragons on the battlefield if you ultimate this thing off. Oh man, crazy. Sarkhan Fireblood. It's a 3-drop Planeswalker. You can uptick this. You may discard a card if you do draw a card. Not a terrible mechanic, but then even better is got +1, add 2 mana of any combination of colors, spend this to cast dragons. So lovely little mana fixing as well. And humorously, its ultimate cracks me up. Create 4 5/5 red dragon creature tokens with flying. If you're to the point where you're hitting the ultimate on this thing, your board state's probably doing pretty decently. You might be well on your way to a win. Now, Zeroland of the Claw, it's a 5-drop 3/4. Now, it's worth noting that this, even though the picture has a dragon in it, this isn't a dragon itself. So just in terms of the dragon tribal stuff, that's something worth remembering. For 3 and tap, you can search your library for a dragon card and put it into play as though it were just played. Shuffle your library afterwards. That creature is unaffected by summoning sickness. In essence, that's old school way of saying it's got haste. Remove the creature from the game at the end of the turn. So then you end up exiling it afterwards. But, you know, if you go fetch out the right kind of card for the state of the battlefield, you could really be swinging it towards your favor. All right, now we are into ramp. We have a lot of staples in here for the most part. We got the Signet in here. We got Birds of Paradise, Chromatic Lantern because we're dealing with all of the colors, although we are skewing heavily towards red for the most part, but we definitely are dealing with all of the colors. And in case you're not familiar with Chromatic Lantern, this allows each of your lands to tap for any mana color, and then it taps itself for any mana color as well. Dockside Extortionist, a great include for most, if not all, red commander builds. Basically, you create X treasure tokens depending on how many artifacts your opponent has, and then you can sack those for mana. Lovely include. Dragon's Hoard is very specific to dragons, of course. It's a 3-drop. Whenever a dragon enters the battlefield under your control, put a gold counter on Dragon's Hoard. Then you can tap it and remove a gold counter from Dragon's Hoard and draw a card. And or, of course, you can tap it and add 1 mana of any color. So this has got a lot of utility to it. Great include for Dragon Tribal. Farseek, you know, because we want to fetch more lands and ramp up into those dragons to get them into play as quickly as possible. Gruul Signet, like I said, we're dealing with a lot of red, but we also have a good amount of green as well. And then we have Mana Crypt, a great include in most commander decks. Not all, but most. You put this in for nothing, and then you can tap it for 2 colorless, and it costs you 3 damage if you lose a flip of the coin. All right, another Signet, and this one is in black-red this time. Smothering Tithe, a great include with any commander deck running white. This just makes your opponent have to really think about their mana base and mana management. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If the player doesn't, you get a treasure token. So you get a ramp up and make them have to manage their mana as well. Lovely include for white. Soul Ring, yes, of course, a Soul Ring. All right, now we are into the dragon category. There are a lot of dragons in MTG to choose from. These are the ones we felt are the most synergetic and the most powerful and make the most sense. Some of them have cost reduction built into them. Some of them just have super janky fun things that dragons can do. And all of them have real big bodies. All right, so let's just plow through these. Atarka World Renderer. It's got Flying Trample, and whenever a dragon you control attacks, which means it doesn't have to be itself necessarily, it gains double strike until end of turn. So that affects all of your dragons. Balefire Dragon, one of the coolest and most just crazy of them, maybe one of 2. I'll talk about the second one in a moment. It's a Kite. So this one is a 7-drop, which is a little spendy, but we got some reduction going on. It's a 6/6 flyer. Whenever deals damage to a player, it deals that much damage to each creature that player controls. So it's even got board clear built into it, depending on what your opponent is playing. Crosis the Purger. It's 3 colors, blue, black, red, 6/6 flyer, and then you can pay an additional 3 if you do damage to a player, and then they have to reveal their hand, and you can discard any cards that are of a color that you choose. This thing is a very cool dragon that's got a 6/6 body, which ain't shabby, and then it's got that additional mechanic to it. Alright, Darigaaz Reincarnated. This is a very cool 7/7 flyer trample haster that if it gets killed, it ends up in exile with 3 egg counters, and then each turn you can remove an egg counter, and then it comes back onto the battlefield with flying, trample, and haste again. So it's very sticky, hard to get rid of. They'll have to do something to deal with this, like exile it so it doesn't actually quote unquote die. So it's a very, very cool card. Dragonlord Dromoka. It is a 6-drop in green, white, 5/7. It's got flying and lifelink. And what's lovely about this is it can't be countered, and your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. Got a lot going on with this card. A very cool dragon include. Dragonlord Ojutai. Say that 3 times fast. It is a 5-drop. I like when dragons cost 5 or less. That's really good. Usually they're in the 7/8 arena. So we've included a few of those, but we've omitted a handful of those more costly ones, even though we have cost reduction built into this. All right. On to Dragonlord. It's an Elder Dragon, 5/4. It's got hexproof as long as it's untapped, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library. So it's got draw and hexproof. Great card. And all of this flying is super crazy fun because typically your opponents aren't going to be having a lot of utility cards to deal with flyers specifically. Unless they know your decks and they've tooled it against you. So, surprise them with this one. Dragonlord Silumgar. Whew, say that one fast too. Also an Elder Dragon, and this is a 6-drop. I really wish this was a 5-drop, but hey, 6. It's a 3/5 flyer death toucher. Whenever it enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature or planeswalker for as long as you control dragon Silumgar. So that's great. You can grab something of theirs that's either a creature or planeswalker, and it's not super spendy to get there, although it only has a 3/5 body. But it does have death touch, so there's something to said for that. Something to be said. All right, Darigaaz Maw of Flames. This one is out of core 20. It is a spendy one, but it's got some really cool janky stuff, especially if it somehow gets haste onto the board presence. It's a flyer, and when it attacks, it gives 4 damage to any target and 3 damage to up to 2 other targets. So you could actually hit somebody in the face for the 4 plus the 3 plus the 3. I remember doing that when I was playing in Standard with this thing. Or you can spread out the love. I mean, it's just a very cool, big-bodied extra bonus thing going on. It does cost 7 though, so that's the downside. All right, Dramocha the Eternal. It's another 5-drop, which like I said, I'm a big fan of 5-drops or less in the Dragon arena. It's a 5/5 flyer. Whenever a dragon you control attacks, bolster 2. So all that bolster means is that you get to put 2 1/1 counters on a creature that you choose. And I believe it's with the least toughness. Yes, least toughness. All right, moving on. Furyborn Hellkite, 4 red. Not a fan again of how much that costs, but it's got some serious jank stank to it. It's a 6/6 with Bloodthirst 6, which means it could potentially come in as a 12/12 flyer. And that's if your opponent had damage that turn. So you wouldn't necessarily try to drop this and somehow it has haste. This is more of a, after the attack phase, you drop that and suddenly there is a gigantic 12/12 flyer that your opponent has to deal with before the next turn. Goldspan Dragon is a 5-drop. Yes, 5. A 4/4 flyer haster right out of Kaldheim. It is whenever Goldspan Dragon attacks or becomes the target of a spell, create a treasure token. But wait, this is even cooler because when you crack that token, you don't get 1 mana of any color. You actually get 2 of that 1 color. Yes, sir. I like that. Hellkite Overlord. And all these Hellkites are pretty crazy. This one is no exception. It's an 8/8, but it costs a whole heck of a lot. It's a 4 black, red, red, green, flyer, trample, haster, but you have for red, you can give it +1, but you can give it regenerate for black and for green. So it's got some stickiness to it. And one of the other favorites of mine, which if you get this thing to hit with haste, man, is it really going to start swinging the game. 4 red, red, flyer, trampler, and if it deals combat damage to a player, you get to snake their artifacts they control, and that's until the end of the game, unless they somehow circumvent that. And then it has the added little bonus of if you end up with 20 or more artifacts, you win the game. Now, we're not super artifact heavy, so unless you snake all of your opponent's artifacts, you're probably not going to have that alt win condition, at least in this build. Pretty crazy, though, that you have that potential to do it. All right, this one's got a weird name. Karthus Tyrant of Jun. Yeah, maybe. It's a 7/7 flyer haster dragon, and whenever it comes into play, gain control of all dragons, then untap all dragons. Other dragon creatures you control have haste. So it's got that cool haste mechanic, and if for some reason your opponents are playing dragons, they just became your dragons. I like it. That's pretty funny. And if it happens, you should probably chuckle a little bit. A little bit. Kokusho, the Evening Star. I put this in because it's got some pretty fantastic life gain. It's a 6-drop, 5/5 flyer, where when it is put into a graveyard, fancy for saying when it dies, each opponent loses 5 life, and you gain that amount. So if you have 3 opponents, you end up gaining 15 life. And it's a 5/5 flyer to boot, so not too shabby. Nesting Dragon, probably one of my top favorites. Definitely in the top 3 in terms of dragons. 5-drop, love that. It's a 5/4 flyer, which is pretty cool. But even better is the landfall mechanic here. Whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 0/2 red dragon egg creature token with Defender. And when the creature dies, create a 2/2 red dragon creature token with flying. And red, this creature gets +1 until end of turn. There's a lot going on there, but basically the coolest part about this is if there's a board wipe, that those eggs become 2/2 red dragon creatures. Pretty cool. So, you know, there's probably going to be board wipe going on if you're playing against 3 people. It's just inevitable. Nicole Bolas the Ravager out of core 19. And it doesn't even really cost that much, although it is in 3 different colors. So it is a flyer 4/4. Whenever Nicole Bolas the Ravager enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. And it's 4 blue, black, red. You can exile it and then return it into the battlefield, onto the battlefield, transformed under its owner's control to the Planeswalker of Doom. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. So the fact that you can flip this thing and then you got this Osimus Maximus Planeswalker to mess around with your opponents, pretty darn cool. Alright, this one is super janky to say, and it's got all the colors of the color wheel. Oh, Kagachi Vengeful Kami. I think I got it. It's a flyer trample 6/6. Not a super fan that it costs you all the colors, but we have lots and lots of mana fixing built into this. Whenever Kagachi Vengeful Kami deals combat damage to a player, if that player attacked you during his or her last turn, exile target non-land permanent that player controls. I put this in here because it's super fun and it's probably going to go off for you, but this is one of those that you could swap it out for a dragon of your choice, just because it's got all those colors in color wheel, but it does do some pretty cool things. Scalelord Reckoner, definitely an include in Dragon if you're in white. It's a 5-drop 4/4 flyer. Whenever a dragon you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, destroy target non-land permanent that player controls. I love that kind of removal ability in a utility card like this built into a dragon. A dragon that destroys things without even attacking. Great. Scourge of the Throne, 6-drop 5/5 flyer with dethrone. Whenever this creature attacks the player with the most life or tied for most life, put a 1/1 counter on it. I mean, that's fine and dandy, but this next part's pretty funny. Whenever Scourge of the Throne attacks for the first time each turn, if it's attacking the player with the most life or tied for most life, untap all attacking creatures after this phase. There is an additional combat phase. So you get a whack-a-mole twice. Yeah, I'm digging it. I'm digging it. The old Skithiryx, the Blight Dragon. It's got Infect. Infect, for those of you who don't know, if your opponent gets 10 Infect counters, they lose the game. This is a flyer that can give itself haste for 1 black pip, and it can also regenerate itself for 2. So you can bring it onto the board for 5, swing with haste for an additional 1, and then also regenerate it if you need to for an additional 2 more. Great, great Infect / Dragon card. It's definitely a card you want to consider for Dragon builds, and if you're building other Infect decks, boy, this is one you should certainly consider putting in. Yes, yes, yes. Sunscorched Regent. Boy, this is a sleeper. I mean, this is a powerful card that really creeps up on your opponent. Costs you 5, so you can probably tease it out by turn 3 or 4, depending on how you're ramping up. It's a flyer. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, put a 1/1 counter on Sunscorched Regent, and you gain 1 life. So this thing is really going to get out of hand really quick if you play it early on, because if you're playing against 3 other people, each time they play a spell, +1, +1, +1, +1, +1, and just suddenly this thing is gigantic and they're gonna have to deal with it, which means you can drop something else because they had to deal with that one, etc., etc., etc. Terror of Mount Velis, a 7-drop. I really think this should have been 6, but it's 7. It does have some cool stuff. It's a 5/5 flyer, double striker. Whenever Terror of Mount Velis enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain double strike until end of turn. So you drop this on the battlefield, everything that's attacking is gonna be double strike. What? Terror of the Peaks. This is, as of this recording, in standard and is being played and included in one of the top 4 decks in the meta in terms of standard. It's that powerful. So it's got flying, and it's for 5, which is pretty reasonable. Flying as a 5/4, spells your opponent cast that target Terror of the Peaks, costing an additional 3 life to cast. Whoop-de-doo on that part. But better is whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peaks deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. So because we are going to be dropping beefy creatures almost always, this thing is going to start hitting your opponent's face or creatures or board state in some form or fashion, as long as Terror of the Peaks is out there doing its shenanigans. Utvara Hellkite, it's 6 red, so a little spendy, but it's a 6/6 flyer. Whenever a dragon you control attacks, put a 6/6 red dragon creature token with flying onto the battlefield. Another dragon that's going to get seriously out of control if not dealt with once it hits the board. Being able to just continually create 6/6 dragons is bananas. It does cost 8 though, so that's the biggest downside. So if you have some reduction going on, which you already have built in with Eminence of your commander, you're going to be able to tease this out for much less than that. Wisitora Nekoru Queen. I had to say that very slowly. This is a weird card because it's a cat dragon. I guess this is what a cat dragon looks like. It's a 5/4 flyer trampler. Whenever Wisitora Nekoru Queen deals combat damage to a player, that player sacrifices a creature, If that player can't, you create a 3/3 black, red, and green cat dragon creature token with flying. So it's a win-win. They either sack something or you get something. Booyah, booyah, booyah base. All right, we are into control. We have just a couple pieces. These both are out of Commander Legends. These both are incredibly, insanely powerful. Let's talk about them. Hull Breacher, 3-drop, 3/2, Merfolk Pirate. It's got Flash, which means you can drop it in when they don't realize you're about to start snaking stuff from them. If an opponent would draw a card except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, instead you create a treasure token. So it keeps them from the extra draw that, oh, I don't know, green likes to do with Sylvan Libraries and blue likes to do with, oh, I don't know, Ristic Studies, or you know the cards. You get to create ramp for yourself. Very cool card. And in the same spirit, in the Commander Legend spirit, is Opposition Agent, doing a similar kind of mechanic, but even more sinister. I love this card. I recommend making sure you have a set of these, or at least one of these, because I think this card is going to steadily go up in value. Of course, if they reprint it to oblivion, it'll keep, at bay. But it's got a flash mechanic just like Hull Breacher. It's a 3/2 human rogue that, in essence, you drop, and if one of your opponents is tutoring, you take over and you get to determine what they tutor, and then you get to exile it for you to play at any point during the remainder of the game. That is some seriously powerful jank at your disposal. And since we're playing Commander EDH, you're gonna have an opponent tutoring for something. So you get to take over, snake one of their cards, or even more if they tutored for multiple cards, which does happen. Just unbelievably powerful. All right, now we're into the few protection pieces we have. A couple staples. Heroic Intervention gives all your permanents hexproof and indestructible. And then, of course, the Lightning Greaves to protect any of those dragons out there that we just want to make sure they aren't going to get whack-a-moled by spot removal. And the added benefit of it giving it haste. Throwing it on a Hellkite Tyrant, and there you go, buddy. And then, of course, we have the big mamma jam of protection to Fairies Protection, which protects all of our permanents, phases them all in and out, and then you can't lose life until your untap step. That is just, woo! Always loving that card. I include this in most, if not all, but most white builds I have. That brings us full circle, I believe. Yeah, I think we've touched on everything. The Dragon, we got this in tribal. It lends itself incredibly well to tribal, specifically because of the eminence mechanics, getting those dragon spells to cost less and less, especially if we double that up with some of the other mechanics that we have on some of the goblins, etc., to make those less and less. Just a very cool, fun build to play. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you have any questions or comments or thoughts, put them in the comments section. We will respond. If there are any episodes you'd like to see, please also put in a request. We are doing these for our subscribers and potential subscribers. Make sure you hit like. It helps us incredibly well with the algorithm, etc., etc. We want to be exposed to as many people as possible. And I don't mean the bad kind of exposed. I digress. All right, moving on. Thanks for tuning in. Check out our other episodes.